Hello, and thanks to everyone for joining today's national meeting session on testing and evaluation of body-worn cameras. My name is Carrie Shelton, and I am the CNA Deputy Project Manager with BJ's Body-Worn Camera Training and Technical Assistance Program. As a reminder, the points of view or opinion expressed here do not necessarily represent the official position or policies of the U.S. Department of Justice. And if you end up with any questions or challenges, please also go ahead and use the chat function for that, or you can email us at bwctta@cna.org throughout today's session or throughout the national meeting. And now I will pass it off to Charles to begin this session on testing and evaluation.
Thank you, Carrie, and welcome everybody. Good afternoon for some and good morning for the rest. For the next 50 or so minutes, we're going to discuss conducting testing and evaluation. A very important topic. I've been on the TTA program since the beginning for the past 8 years. So I've seen the results for those that conduct a good program and for those that choose not to conduct testing and evaluation. Worst case scenario, you'll choose a camera that's not in a system that won't meet your needs, may fail during a critical incident. Could be all kinds of bad ramifications on that. But of course, everybody knows what testing and evaluation, what you want to get out of it. You want to be able to develop a list of vendors, cameras, products that'll give you the best possible results. Today, I have a co-moderator, Mr. Jeff Smith. He's a TTA senior advisor like myself, and I have three distinguished guests from three of our grant sites. I have the Deputy Director of Operations, Mr. Ben Collins from the DC Department of Corrections. I have Lieutenant Steve Gresham from Henderson, North Carolina, the Police Department. And I also have Lieutenant Steve Tomelko from Michigan State Police. All three have conducted testing and evaluation. And what we're going to do is we'll have a panel discussion. I'm going to turn it over in a minute to my co-moderator who will introduce himself and then turn it over to our panelists to introduce themselves shortly. And then we're going to ask our panelists to describe a little, or at least tell us a little bit about the department and then describe how they conducted testing and evaluation. And then after all that gets done, Jeff and I will probably ask the panelists questions. So without any further ado, Jeff, I'm going to turn it over to you to go ahead and introduce yourself and followed up by the panelists.
Thanks, Charles. My name's Jeff Smith. I'm a senior advisor with CNA, also a subject matter expert. Went through this before on my own as retired director of public safety back in about 2015-16 with an expansion program. We conducted a lot of test and evaluation, even in the mid to late 2000s when body-worn cameras were just starting up. But yeah, I'm looking forward to a great conversation with our panelists. So I'll turn it over to Ben and he can introduce himself real quick.
Hello, everyone. My name is Ben Collins. I'm with the DC Department of Corrections. I am the Special Assistant to the Deputy Director of Operations. I've been with the DC Department of Corrections for over 21 years. I have 31 years of law enforcement experience.
Thanks, Ben. Lieutenant, would you like to go next? Steve Gresham.
Hello, everybody. My name is Steve Gresham. I'm with the Henderson, North Carolina Police Department. We are a smaller municipal agency, 52 sworn. I have 28 years in law enforcement. 27 has been with this department. The last 3 or so years, I wear many hats, but a couple of things that I do is equipment acquisitions, and I'm also the accreditation manager for Collier Fire Agency.
Thank you, sir. Lieutenant Tomelko.
Thank you, sir. First Lieutenant Steve Tomelko with the Michigan State Police. I have about 23 years with MSP, kind of been a little bit everywhere throughout the agency. My last 4 have been overseeing the mobile office environment section, which is all of our infield technology, communications, items like that. The State Police of Michigan is about 2,000 sworn officers, about 1,000 civilian, and we are a full service agency, so we answer the barking dog complaints all the way up to the homicides. So thank you for having me.
Thanks. Appreciate you being here. Charles? Would you like to get started?
Sure. Okay, what I'd like to do, and maybe we'll start with Ben. Ben, if you can tell us a little bit how your department approached doing testing and evaluation to come up with choosing the product you did in the end.
Our facility, we're somewhat, although that we're a jail, we're somewhat unique because of some of the things that we perform. We have a staffing complement of over 900 officers altogether with civilians, close to 1,500 employees. But we act as a detention center, but there's some other functions that we do that are a little unique to most jail facilities. We have a court transportation unit. We operate the police central lockup. We do the medical outpost for the entire city for all law enforcement agencies. So there were some varying aspects to the job jobs that we performed that made us somewhat unique from a lot of the detention facilities. And we were able to agree to do initially it was a 6-month pilot program. It kind of grew into close to 12 months. And we used our tactical units. We identified a couple of housing units that we would use for the pilot program. Initially, our policies were kind of mirroring some of the other local law enforcement, particularly the police agencies. I mean, it really gave us the base for the policy that we used throughout the pilot program. But knowing that as the program developed and as we went along, we knew that we would make changes along the way. And at some point, we'll come up with a nice, strong policy that fits exactly what our needs were. And that's something I noticed in corrections and I was 10 years with the police department as well. So there's a difference. There's a uniqueness with corrections as it relates to body-worn cameras. One example in our facilities, our officers are mandated to record once they go into a particular housing unit, so that their cameras are on for that entire time while they're in the tier, while they're interacting with the inmates. So the cameras are on. And I noticed in most police departments, they activate upon a call or whatever incident takes place. So those are some of the nuances that make corrections a little different. Our training, we constructed an 8-hour training block of instruction, which we found to be really good, 75% practical application and 25% just classroom activity. So we were able to present our officers and staff with different scenarios and just to get them comfortable with the equipment. I would recommend a pilot program if you're looking into this, to really work out some of the issues that you will find along the way. And I highly recommend the pilot program. It's been extremely helpful for our agency.
Thank you. And we're going to circle back. If I can, I'd like Lieutenant Gresham maybe to tell us a little bit about his testing and evaluation and how they approached it.
We've kind of been looking at implementing body-worn cameras for some time. A lot of it had to do with the money aspect of it. We're a smaller agency. Our funding is not as much as some of the larger agencies. So as we went on, and matter of fact, right now we do not have equipment right now our equipment has been ordered. We're still waiting for it to get here so we can now start the implementation process. We do have policies already in place. So when we're looking at specific vendors to go to, we wanted to test at least 3 different vendors. When we got to looking, we didn't realize exactly how many body-worn camera vendors there are out there, and there are literally hundreds. So we wanted to go with a company that was reputable, somebody that we knew, somebody that was widely used through other agencies throughout the country. So we started taking a look at a couple, and we were able to get the product in our hands from 2 of those companies. The third company, they came to us. We had the demonstration on it. The ones we actually did have in our hands to actually test and evaluate, we used for probably 3 or 4 months. We got a chance to, how it operated, how it benefited us, how we tested against, the policies we already had, the problems we may see throughout the process, how we needed to proceed going forward once we get the equipment in our hands.
Okay, thank you. And we'll come back, especially since you have a smaller agency. Be interested in how you did it. Jeff and I will come back and ask you a few specific questions. And of course, Lieutenant D'Amico, can you go ahead and tell us a little bit of how Michigan approached T&E?
Yeah, the position I'm in was created about 4 years ago. And when I came into it, the mobile office environment section never really existed. So we decided to make an investment into our technology of our vehicles. And I was handed the body-worn project along with the new in-car video system that we were intended to explore. So our testing and evaluation for body-worn cameras was really extended about 4 years. It started out when we had to identify what we wanted, where we wanted to go, what direction, what capacity we had, and we had to look at our current capacity of what we had in the patrol vehicles. And it took a lot of decision briefs. It took a lot of planning and working with our legislatures, different stakeholders in it. And we revamped our patrol car first. We wanted to create that, as it was said earlier, ecosystems. We wanted to create a true ecosystem in our patrol vehicles. One of our issues is 95% of our fleet is take home. So those troopers were going home. So we initially had tested offloading at the work sites. And you would find that you'd have a trooper that would come into a work site with 40, during our pilot program, 40 gigs of video on the car. And they have to sit at the work site for almost 4 hours to offload that video, which was not practical. Couldn't pull a trooper off the road. So we knew we wanted to do a cellular offload. So we had to invest on new antennas, new modems that we did. We're doing a dual SIM solution to it. And then we also upgraded our MDCs, or MDTs, as many agencies call them. We turned about $4 million project into about $12.5 million over about 3 years. And that gave us the base, the foundation we needed to deploy body cameras. We knew that was our ultimate goal. And because of what we wanted to do, we chose in-car video systems first. So we had that base. And then when we started our testing and evaluating for those systems, we had to have cloud storage. We knew that we were going to have that. We had tested a couple hybrid solutions, on-prem servers that would offload to the cloud later. That just did not work for us. We wanted that ability to view videos quickly. We knew down the road we'd want probably live streaming, and we wanted to have unlimited storage for our troopers. We had to look at legal ramifications. We had to look at civil ramifications. So we pulled in focus groups from not only vendors, from internal teams within the MSP, outside agencies we engaged, similar agencies such as like Pennsylvania State Police, California Highway Patrol. We started those work groups along with the state of Michigan's technology group, and we identified our key points that we wanted for our body camera system. So that's kind of where we got to this point now. And starting in January this year, we've started to deploy our body cameras that we've chosen through the MSP. And we're about 1,100 body cameras out in the field. And we intend to finish by the end of the year, which will be about 2,000 body cameras to everyone we did. And some of the key portions and it's been mentioned earlier, is who's going to get that body camera. And I believe the chief of Knoxville there, established anyone making contact with the public. That's obviously for us what we're doing. And then the other thing that we found with our agency is you have to have a lot of spare body cameras out there because we're so rural in areas and cities. We had to make that use case, hey, we're going to have some body cameras. You're going to be sitting at work sites. And those are the spare ones that we can push out. We're seeing mounting issues that was mentioned as we pushed forward. We have a lot of deployments for civil unrest in Michigan, and we have what we call our turtle suits, our riot deployment suits. And where do you mount your body cameras on those? We have our emergency support team, which is our equivalent of a SWAT team that is a full service team that's always out. Where do they mount on their uniforms? So those are some of the struggles that we had that we deployed to some of the interdiction teams at first, but we're still identifying issues as we move forward. It's kind of our process. It's taken overall deployment's been going to be about a year, but the actual T&E of different platforms has been almost 4 years.
Thanks. I want to just follow up a little bit with what Lieutenant Temelko just talked about with the working groups, like either a technical working group or outside working groups to bring in during your test and eval. And I'd love to hear from Lieutenant Gresham and Ben, if you guys experienced that at all, who all was involved. And then in addition to that, did all of you, for reviewing specific products, did you come up with defined desired equipment specifications, features, things like that, including redaction software and that sort of thing that would have helped you either with that working group or with trying to figure out a vendor and a product? So a little bit of both of those kind of tied into the same question.
I can take that first. We had different groups contribute to our process when we initially started the process of just deciding on body-worn cameras itself. The Metropolitan Police Department played a large role in that. As you know, the District of Columbia is not a state, so we don't have a state law enforcement commission, so to speak. So the Metropolitan Police kind of blazes the path with some of the initiatives and things of that nature. So we went with the company that was being used by the Metropolitan Police Department for various reasons. As far as some of the groups that contributed, we even had Public Defender's Office, we had some community groups, as well as some of our U.S. Attorney's Office. We don't have local prosecutors in District of Columbia, so the U.S. Attorney's Office and a couple of federal agencies also helped us in forming focus groups and at some of the issues and things that they wanted to see implemented. So it worked out pretty well.
With us, we knew that when we implement, get them out there, everybody in our department is going to have a body-worn camera all the way up to the chief of police, but probably going to affect our patrol officers more than anybody else, our uniform guys. So when we were doing the test and evaluation, we wanted the products in there. We picked out 2 officers and we got the test and evaluation. We had them wear it over a period of several months. Some of the things we were looking for is how easy is it to offload it? How easy what do you have to do to activate it? How durable is the equipment? People here are cops. We can break an anvil if we had to. Also, the battery life. We wanted something. Most officers work 12-hour shifts, and sometimes they work afterwards. Doing jobs on the side also. So we wanted a battery that would last throughout their day. There's so many things. Could we categorize the different recordings? How would it fit in with our retention schedule? Could we redact things from it if we had to? How easy would it be to share the video? So we went through all kinds of different things that we wanted in a body-worn camera, and that's what we were looking for during our test and evaluation process.
Kind of a follow-up on your approach and as far as the use of working group. Of course, an internal working group's a fairly easy thing. You can assign officers, you can have IT show up. As far as your external partners, and of course, I've been mentioned it, the U.S. Attorney's Office, he had public defenders. Did you look at their capabilities, their capacity as far as what the court can do, what your prosecutors can do, and did that play into choosing the product that you ultimately ended up? Were there aspects taken into, or did they just come and help develop a policy?
Somewhat, say, with our district attorney's office. Of course, body-worn cameras new to us, but we've had cameras in the field for 30 years, especially with our in-car cameras. So we already had a process down on how we, the type of things that they need, how we share that information with them. And then, North Carolina is a little bit different than some of the other states. In North Carolina, recordings aren't public record. The only person that can even release that information is our Superior Court judge. Those type of things that we kind of looked at when we're doing it too. But as far as, mostly it'd be like our district attorney's office, who we already share the information with already.
Along that was, all three of you had mentioned some of the things from a technology aspect that you felt you had to have. Did a working group develop a formal list? Did you have to have X, low light capability, all the different aspects, a certain field of view? Did you actually have a specification that a group could assess a product?
Well, we knew we wanted a camera that would be able to see in most every situation that we are in. Low light, wide field of view, those things. As far as the data that we have, how we were going to store it, that was one of the other big things that we kind of looked at during this whole process. We looked at the cloud storage, and with most cloud storage vendors, it's an enormous price per month, per year, per unit. And we decided early on we wanted to go to an in-house solution, so we went with a server base.
Just a quick question, since you did mention that your storage is in-house, it's still in-house storage? You haven't changed your mind about cloud storage or anything? Is that what you ultimately went with?
Yeah, that's what we ultimately went with. The vendor we went to, they were already handling our in-car camera that we've had for the last probably 10 years. So we were familiar with them. Their software where it works, the data storage capabilities. So, we decided to go with them. Actually, we got an entire new server just for, this purpose.
There's, of course, a lot of pros and cons with going with something, and you mentioned that you had an in-car system and you wanted to do something similar. Was there other applications that body-worn camera would touch or affect that you considered during your testing and your piloting, and such as your CAD system and everything? Some body-worn cameras pull CAD data to check compliance. Were there other technologies that body-worn cameras would interface with that you consider? And of course, Lieutenant Tomiko, he mentioned they had to upgrade quite a bit before they even started thinking about body-worn cameras. Was there any other technology that you may have had to consider in your body-worn camera program?
No, not really. We were not going to have ours interface with CAD or anything like that. So I know a couple of things we did want to happen is, for the officer that's out in the field that's using the product, we wanted them to be able to review the video on scene right after the fact. I know there's some technology there, how to interfaces with a cell phone so they can see the footage through their cell phone, out in the field. As far as any other technologies, I know the server that we're getting will actually integrate into our current network within our department, our computer network, so we can see it through different terminals throughout the building. But that's about it.
And I'm probably let Jeff ask, and I got one more question. And this has to do with state legislation, state statute. How did that play in, if it did at all, into how you conducted your T&E and what you had to have in a body-worn camera product? Was there certain aspects such as retention, release to the public, that steered you to a certain direction or to a specific product that someone may offer?
In our situation, we're a smaller agency. We don't have an abundance of recording. We don't have a whole lot of people asking for copies of recordings. It's just the way our state law is laid out. So we're not having to go through and pull that information all the time. So we knew that wouldn't cause too big of a problem. We had to actually download it to a disk and then provide it to our district attorney's office or to the court. So they did play into it a little bit. If we were having to do a lot of redaction, make a lot of copies, the cloud base may have been a better solution as far as being able to share some of that data. But I think the solution we found met our goals and what we needed.
So following up just a little bit on everything that we've talked about so far and just tying up towards part of this T&E process. So when all of you came around to after you got through your pilot program, your testing phase, and you started to get ready to, let's say, either put out an RFP, bid on them. I don't know if any of you did sole source or single source, but my question is about all of that. Was there a process involved in how you decided after you did the T&E, whether that's feedback from everyone, things like that, on how you decided either who you wanted to go with, or more like that question earlier on, did you come up with a list? Was there certain things that you had to have that you included as part of that procurement process? And that's open for everybody.
Well, in the District of Columbia, as I mentioned earlier, I kind of think the MPD, our police department, kind of set the standard for some of the local agencies. So it was pretty much, we knew that it would boil down to basically the same vendor, the same software platform, and consistency with our police department, only because it was more convenient with the U.S. attorneys, the prosecutors, other local agencies, as far as sharing information. All of those things were already occurring. So we were kind of late in the game. And so we just stepped in and just kind of kept everything basically the same. And it worked out for us well.
Lieutenant Tomelko, what about you?
So we did form focus groups that came in, which was, we have 83 counties in Michigan. We brought in as many prosecutors as we could to get their input from what failures we had in the field from prior systems, what they would like to see in the future. We spoke with local civic groups, actually, to discussing what would they see for transparency. And obviously the field and other state agencies, other large city agencies, and kind of figured out what would be the best case to move forward. Some of the key things was we wanted cloud. We knew we wanted cloud. We knew that it had to offload from the vehicle as well as the work site if necessary. Retention period, it may sound strange, but our retention period for every video, doesn't matter what it is 3.5 years. And that was dictated by civil litigations in the Metro Detroit area. A certain legal firm down there would sue us at 2 years and 11 months. So we wouldn't have the video in. So we've extended that. Cost, that was a huge aspect as well. So, and then a couple other key things, we wanted to interface with our smartphones. Every enforcement member has a smartphone to be able to utilize that. And then interview room. We wanted to have a singular platform. It didn't matter who it was that would do you could do a one-stop shop. You can connect all your cases together, interview room, body-worn camera, and in-car video, and be able to send that to a prosecutor. That was another huge thing, was that prosecutor portal that we've worked on for the past couple of years. So when we went into the request, the RFP information for the in-car stuff, we also included as well the future for the body-worn stuff that we knew that we wanted to have. So our initial RFP was off of the in-car camera systems, incorporate body-worn cameras as the next stepping stone in our process. So that's kind of how we worked it out, and it was constantly evolving. And those were what helped us weed out, as it was mentioned, there are so many body-worn camera companies out there, and it allowed us to bring it down to a more manageable group that we could actually test those in the field and send those out for evaluations from the troopers.
Thanks. Lieutenant Gresham, you have anything you'd like to add on this?
Yeah, I think when it came down to us, we wanted somebody that was reputable, somebody we could trust. We had a situation back 10, 15 years ago. We had went with a vendor that provided in-car cameras to all our patrol cars. That company ended up getting bought out, a couple of times, and ended up, we just had no support, and the company went away, and we were stuck with, we paid all this money for a platform that we can no longer use. So that was one of our big things we were looking at. So we wanted to use somebody that we said it was reputable and we were already familiar with, and that what a lot of that led to what the reason we went with the company we went with.
Appreciate that. So I'm going to bring up something that I know is sometimes touchy with a lot of people, but my experience goes back quite a bit with about the first time I was burnt by a vendor. So I kind of learned the hard way, probably, 15 years ago. And that's not knocking vendors and it's not knocking salespeople, but I learned some pretty hard lessons from that experience. What would you give for advice to other agencies when they're at that test and evaluation stage, or they're gathering information to kind of help them avoid some of those pitfalls with either the sales pitch or vendor promises and things like that? That's open to everyone.
Do your research. Look at the companies that you're looking at. Matter of fact, during our T&E process, one of the vendors we decided to try, we'd use them for some other things. They also offered a body-worn camera. Well, during the T&E process, they decided not to do body-worn cameras anymore. It's those types of things you got to look at. Just do your research. Look where they're at. Look at their technology. Do due diligence in looking into the company before you decide.
For Michigan, one of the things that we did as Lieutenant there said is, we did a lot of research on the companies as we move forward. We reached out to peer agencies, find out what their thoughts were and processes that they went through. We also identified during T&E or when we were dealing with it, if they actually came through on deliverables. We gave them a very set, clear goal standards as a process to move through. And if they couldn't meet those, or we saw early on issues, which should be the honeymoon phase, that wasn't happening with us. So that helped us to identify a couple others as we move forward. And then every meeting we had, every correspondence, we followed up with a written correspondence and kept record of that. So if they promised us something by that, and then we made sure that was documented moving forward, that we had those, and we would establish touch points with that vendor to discuss further to make sure that they're still going to come through on what they had said.
Ben, what about you?
We used, again, I harken back to the police department. They did a lot of the heavy lifting for us. Some of the trial and error and some of the situations they went through, they were able to convey a lot of that to us. So they really educated us on what to expect. So it really worked out well with us as it relates to the vendor that we selected and some of the things we knew what to expect and questions we knew to ask only because of that relationship we had with our police department.
Fantastic. Thank you. Charles, you want to shoot one at him?
Sure. And I don't mean to put anybody on the spot, but kind of in hindsight, do you feel you chose the best product? And just open to everyone.
I think for us, I think we picked the correct product. My thoughts might change in 6 months after we've actually rolled it out. But right now, I think we did a good job doing our T&E, doing our research. What our needs were, what our goals were. I think we found a company that met all of those.
Yeah, I agree. I'm happy with the vendor that we have. The system is very user-friendly. The software that we're using for audits and different things that we do, documents we create from it, and all that is very user-friendly. Durability of the product it's been pretty durable so far. We haven't had many issues. The service has been really outstanding. So so far, so good.
I would echo that. For what we needed and what we had, I'm happy with it. I will say my only, and this is just coming from me personally, is I felt that our in-car system was the better in-car system, and another vendor we looked at possibly had a better body camera system, but we couldn't get those merged together. So I am not complaining about our body camera system. I think it does everything that we need, but there was almost a mesh between the two separate vendors that probably would have been the most ideal situation that we just didn't fit into our roadmap of what we wanted to do.
You make a good point, and a lot of our grantees, a lot of agencies decide to go with a particular vendor because they do have a product already, whether it's in-car camera or some type of video system. And kind of what you said, I've heard that multiple times, that we're going to give up something a little to stay with a particular vendor. Kind of along those lines, aside because you wanted that vendor, did you compromise it as far as maybe a capability? Was something more important than others? So, well, cloud storage was more important, so you gave up a little bit of this, maybe on the cost side or something. Were there compromises when you made your choice?
I think our biggest compromise was the actual body camera itself. Was a second vendor that we didn't go with for body cameras maybe had a little better body camera. But the biggest one that for me personally was the management software. I felt for the body camera was better than what the in-car camera system we chose. That was our biggest one. Now, is the vendor making strides to move forward that we have selected? Yes, they are. And to be completely transparent, I feel as though they're mirroring the management software of the body-worn camera that we had looked at as well. So that was the biggest compromise we had. But we got a lot of good stuff back on the other end with the vendor we did go with. So it's a wash in both directions for us.
Jeff, do you got anything else?
I've got a couple, and I know we're running out of time, and
that's what I wanted
and we want to make sure that if anybody's got any questions that they can ask the panel. But before I ask mine, let me check this one real quick. Somebody was asking, they said they're curious in what car routers are being used, that they're looking at two different companies. So if you guys don't mind, how'd that go for you? If you want to say who you looked at or who you ended up going with, if you know, I think somebody would appreciate some of that info as well.
In Michigan right now, we're currently using the Cradlepoint 1700 with the quad SIM 1200M internal modems. We are transitioning to a 1900 for the 5G, and we are also currently looking at a DeGiro. It's a tri-band. It actually aggregates all three carriers, FirstNet, Verizon, and T-Mobile, to get the best service down. So those are the current three that we're testing, but the standard one is the 1700 in the field.
We will not be uploading from the field. All of our upload done at the police department.
Thanks. Lieutenant Melko, so let me come back real quick, you mentioned that, and this is more of a curious question for me, and probably maybe we've got some others that are either large counties or maybe it's even state. When you guys are doing that, and you mentioned the different carriers, and because you're all over the place for as far as reception goes, and we all know still some rural spots in Michigan are horrible, no matter who you have as a carrier. Do you guys run multiple in units, like as across the board, or is it more specific to areas on how you choose that, or do you just have like a standard that you're running either 2, 3 different carriers in one? And maybe I said too much.
No, that's actually a great question. This is a continuous evolving item for us. We work really, really close with FirstNet, Verizon, and T-Mobile. We've heat map tested the entire state, and obviously towers continue to go up, but we've identified certain areas in northern Michigan where FirstNet's the primary carrier, and we'll deploy FirstNet in there. And there's other areas where Verizon may be better, or T-Mobile, or maybe we have a mix of both. How we separate our traffic is our in-car camera system, and body-worn cameras are going off of a end-to-end encryption on a private APN. And then the computer system, all of our CGIS traffic, things like that, is on a whole separate SIM. We had explored failovers. Those don't work as well in the Cradle Point as we had hoped. So that's why we're looking at the DeGero. But yeah, it took a lot of work. It's still continuing, engaging those vendors and being proactive of identifying the best services in those areas. But just like you said, northern Michigan is a nightmare for connectivity. The troopers have learned where they're going to get cell coverage, and they try to get to those areas to offload video.
Excellent. Thanks. And I know that Charles and I have like one ending question that we want to ask all of you. So I'm going to save that one, and I'm going to ask one more. And this one might be a little bit tough, but if you could come down with maybe 1 or 2, what would have been deciding factor or factors? Because I know coming up with one may be too tough on the vendor you ended up selecting. What would you say was that priority factor for who you ended up going with? And it could be cost, storage. I mean, it could be a realm of things. But if you can come up with 1 or 2, I think that might help everyone that's listening a little bit as well.
I have issues sometimes with packaging when a product is packaged. Additional costs for different features that sometimes you think that should be offered as a base. That sometimes is an issue with me. I don't call it hidden cost per se, but just the additional cost for certain items that you may need to use and that the system calls for using on a regular basis. It may end up being some type of additional costs associated with that. Some vendors will do that. That's one thing I would look out for.
Thanks, Ben.
I think that one of the biggest deciding factors for us was cost, especially server-based versus cloud-based. Cost difference between those is substantial. And the other is just dealing with a company we were already familiar with. Those are probably the 2 biggest deciding factors for us.
And again, repeating everyone else, cost and storage. Those are the 2 key for us.
Fantastic. Thank you. You want to ask the last one, Charles, or would you like me to?
Sure. If you had to do it all over again, and this is in reference to how you did your pilot, your testing, and your evaluation, would you do it the same, or would you make a change? And if so, what would you change?
I'm really happy with the process by which we've gone through. We've been able to really sit back, take our time, evaluate things, make adjustments as we go, and work towards a really good product, a really good, strong policy. A lot of the contributors that we had along the way, Jeff and some other people along the way, have really, really been instrumental in assisting us and connecting us with other agencies. And so I'm really happy with the entire process. I don't know how many agencies may get a year to do a pilot program, but if you can do that, I would recommend it.
I think if we had to do it all over again, I think the results would be probably the same. I think we identified, a company that, we liked. Like I said, we were familiar with. Also, we had a budget, to worry about. We spoke with a lot of, in addition to T&E, we spoke with other agencies that were using the product we were looking at going to. So I think overall, we made the right choice. We had to do it over again. I'm pretty sure we would have ended up at the same conclusion.
Yeah, I think it would be the same for us as well. There's always going to be new technology, something nice and new that's coming out. Would I love to just revamp everything again? Yeah, but realistically, what we have now in place does exactly what we need it to do.
Before we open it up, and I know we only got a couple minutes left, questions. I just want to, we do have a half dozen or so slides that kind of walks through the process of T&E. We're not going to go through them. We'll open up the questions right now. But when they do post this on the web, they will be available. I do encourage everybody to go take a look at them, as that actually gives the steps to conducting T&E and things to consider in there. So at this time, I'd like to go ahead and open it up to questions. And Carrie, are you still with us?
Yes, Charles, there are two questions in the chat. Actually, there were a couple questions in the chat, but I think you hit on most of them. So two that I saw that were outstanding, left to be answered. The first one was for Henderson City. The question was, did Henderson City build the in-house storage system, or did your vendor build the storage system for you?
We could have done it either way. We chose to have the vendor build it for us, knew all their specifications, exactly how it needed to be built. So we decided to go with them. Cost-wise, it was about the same. So we thought it was important to let them go ahead and do it since, they, as far as on the support side, we would have their support, going forward, because they build it, they know it, they knew the ins and outs of it. So that's the reason we went with that option.
Very good. Thank you. And the second question is, our jurisdiction received a small body-worn camera grant for a pilot in 2019 and were later awarded an expansion grant. Would it be advisable to use varying models of camera for our second phase? This one's probably for you, Charles, or Jeff. I don't know which of you wants to take it, but more of a BJA kind of grant question.
I can take a little bit of a stab. So just let me make sure I'm clear. They have one set of cameras. They got a grant. They're going to do an expansion, and they're contemplating whether or not they should look at it like a separate vendor and keep their original vendor. Is that kind of the question?
Sounds
and
like
having
it.
Two separate. That is probably the conversation for ages, and it's longer than what we've got left. I'd encourage them, and this is not self-promotion, but later here in the week, we're doing an integration session as well that I'll be on. A lot of times it's there's no really a right answer to that question, because it does come down, all three of these gentlemen hit on it too. Cost is one. If I go back to our early days, we ran with two separate systems for body-worn cameras and in-cars for a while because we couldn't afford to integrate into one system. Eventually we could, and I can tell you that for us, it's just like vendors, it's just like policies. Everything needs to be specific to what's going to work for your agency. And so we had to kind of wait. And then once we could, it became much more simple because our in-car, our interview rooms, our BWCs were all on that same platform for redaction and grabbing it and review and audit and all of that sort of thing. So most of the agencies that I've spoken to over the years, really similar to probably my story from my department, is they prefer that they've got that one solution if possible, but it's back to what's going to work best for the agency. Can they afford it? Or are you going to have two competing systems, or is there a way that they are going to talk together? So maybe that's how the budget's going to have to be, because that's the only thing you can afford to do. And then in the future, maybe you switch them back to one. I can just say that different vendors, sometimes they work really well together. Sometimes they don't. Again, back to those promises and different things. Sometimes they'll say they do. And then you're spending a lot of time with having them come in and back to that promise that they made either in a contract or anything else, and getting them to communicate back and forth sometimes can bite you. So it's one of those that, you really got to try to figure out, what can you afford? What does it look like? And maybe you have to do something called, I'm making up a word, but you got some gap years that you're using two different systems because you can't afford to have the same system all the way across. But I would just say, from all of the agencies that I've dealt with, personal experience and that sort of thing, that it's much easier, especially with just the body worn. If those are the same vendor, maybe you're tying them in with a different vendor in the car or your interview rooms. But depending on the systems, depending on the vendor, you might be able to get it to work. Hopefully that answers. Charles, I'll let you chime in a little bit, but that's based on what we've seen.
I would say it's probably not the most ideal situation to end up with two different products, especially from the management aspect. Is it doable? Yes. And there's agencies that, for whatever reason, choose that path. But I would say plan out, and Jeff mentioned it, plan out what it's going to look like in 5 years, that it's at some point you're going to merge and you're going to end up with one system or a product that works on everything. Because everybody knows, even if you choose one vendor, they have different model cameras, they have upgrades to their software. It's difficult even then, and you have to plan. But look out to the long run and figure out what you want to look at or look like in the end. Have a plan. If you're going to migrate to a different system, are you going to migrate everybody eventually to that system? Just kind of think it out. It's tough for officers to use different products. Look at everything. If an officer has to go pick up somebody else's product because his is broke, how are you going to work that issue? It's not ideal, but it's doable.
So real quick, Charles, I'm going to let you close out, but there's another question in the chat that I'd like to grab just to see if any of you have experienced this and have some info. And I'm going to shut up, but I want to thank all of you for participating. Really appreciate it. It's been great having this conversation. So Let me ask this. I know we're out of time, and then I'll let Charles close us out. The question is, any situations where an officer did not have cloud connectivity for an extended period of time and filled up their camera? Did you use temp storage before uploading to the cloud? Does this situation exist with any of your agencies? Their concern is a week or more in a remote location with no access to the cloud, or something like that happens and it's filled, you just issue another camera to the officer.
I can talk about this one real quick for us. We do have a couple of redundancies if it is unable to connect via the car. We do provide every trooper basically a kit, and they have an offload station they can take to their house and plug in at home. We do have an agreement with the Trooper Association in Michigan that they would utilize that for that type of activity with some sort of like reimbursement for the state. So we have that route, and then we have offload stations at all of our work sites. We haven't really encountered this with body-worn cameras. We did have a server failure through the cloud for the in-car camera systems that we did not. We were lucky enough that it only lasted a couple of days. Camera systems did not fill up completely, and they were able to offload after that down period. So that's the closest we've come to it.
Excellent. Thank you.
In closing, because I know we're running out of time. We all got to join the main group again. Of course, I want to thank our panelists. Thank you for sharing how you conducted T&E. I want to thank all those that viewed this today. And in closing, I kind of want to throw this out there. Of course, we have 90 plus grantees. Everybody's conducting T&E a little bit differently. If you would like to talk to another agency that's conducting T&E, please let your site team know. We'll put you in contact with another agency. Use the wealth of knowledge that's out there, because everybody is looking at these products and collecting information out there. And we're all one big group. So if you have questions about how to conduct T&E, what other agencies are doing, why they chose what, talk to your site teams and we'll link you up with other agencies. Even if you're considering a particular product, we'll find an agency that chose that product or is considering that product. Once again, thank you and good luck in choosing your product.
Thank you.
Great. Thank you, everyone. Thank you for that very informative panel. As you can hear, there are lots of things to consider for T&E, lots of things that would make different vendor options be right for different agencies. So again, please reach out to us if you have any questions about T&E. There's a couple of infos in the chat. If you do have additional questions, please feel free to send them to us at bwctta@cna.org.